All right, let's start today's class. Today we are going to be having a quick look, introductory look into communication. Feel free to mute your mic.
Okay.
Yeah. Today we are going to have a quick look into communication with external APIs through JavaScript, and then using that dynamic data to populate our DOM. So from our previous class, what we did was that we had this mock data from an API response, right? And every time we had this, we set this mock data and then we used it to populate our div. Today we're going to be doing something similar, but not using this. So I'm going to comment this out as well as this, and as well as this. As well as this here. So let's have all of that commented out and cleaned up. And inside the body, I'm just going to create a div. Let's see whether we have Emmet here. Awesome. Okay, so in this div, I want to have an input box. Let's have an input box called, let's give it an ID of character number. Let's save that. Let's refresh our page. Yes, we have that here now. Now let's come here and let's put a button. Get character info. So here I will change the title to Game of Thrones. And what we are going to be doing today is something very simple. We are going to create, you're basically going to create a simple JavaScript. Basically, we're going to create a simple JavaScript request that goes to the Game of Thrones API and retrieves a certain value for us based on whatever values we give to it. Now we're not using forms because I don't want to go into the concept of forms yet. So we're just using buttons, and let's give this button JS btn. Let's call it JS button, and let's append this with the JS prefix again. Let's save this. Okay, get character info. Hopefully all is well. Let's try to save this again and refresh. All right. Let's quickly just give this a class. Or I will just give it an inline styling style, and let's call this background color. Let's say white. Let's give it black. Let's save this. Let's refresh that. Good. And let's say color equals to white. And save that and refresh, and yes, okay, so now we have this button. Now we currently have this button that is clickable. Right. Now, what we will do here, as usual, is we will start by adding an onClick, and we will give it, it will call a function called get character info. Right. Now, up to this point, we haven't done anything in JavaScript. We have just created the interaction environment that we need. So if we refresh this and we click this, it doesn't do anything because our get character info has not, that function is not yet defined. So let's come below. Let's come below here, and let's create another div. Let's say div, and inside this div we want to say id equals to JS GOT, which is Game of Thrones, character info. So now if you refresh this, there's a div there, but there's nothing inside of it because it's not populated. Now let's take a quick look at what we're going to be dealing with today. We're going to be looking at an API called an API of ice and fire. So I will just quickly open that here, and let's go into it. And you see, we say an API of ice and fire, which basically is about Game of Thrones. Now, if you see here, the format for making the request is actually the URL that we have up there /API and then / the specific resource and a number. So for example, we have books 1, characters 583, houses 378. So let's change this to houses 666 and see if there is a house like that. You see, it says could not find any resource. Now let's change it to 001. We could not still find any resource, but that's not the reason why. It's because we have house instead of houses. So let's go back and try 666 just to be sure. There's nothing there, and let's go to try 378. Now we have something back. Let's change this to 259 just to see if there's anything, and there we have something. Okay, so what we are going to be dealing with is actually characters, because we want to get character info. So this is what we'll be dealing with today, character. And we have Jon Snow. Let's change this to 001 and see if there's anyone there. And then we have no name, but we have someone who's a female, the daughter of the dusk. Now let's come here. Let's say 300. Let's do a search. We have Dennis Arin and his male, when he died, his titles, the aliases, father, mother, allegiances, and basically all of this. So we're basically going to try to interact with these characters. We're going to be doing that from our static template. So let's get to Code Sandbox. Now what we will be doing is I'll be introducing what we call fetch. So let's open the fetch documentation. This is the documentation for the fetch API. And if you read from here, it says the fetch API provides a JavaScript interface for accessing and manipulating parts of the HTTP pipeline, such as requests and responses. It also provides a global fetch method that provides an easy, logical way to fetch resources asynchronously across the network. This kind of functionality was previously achieved using XML HTTP request. Fetch provides a better alternative that can be easily used by other technologies such as service workers. Fetch also provides a single logical place to define other HTTP related concepts such as calls and extension to HTTP. Anyways, that information you can take your time and read through it later on. However, this is a typical example of what the fetch request is like. So there's the fetch, and then there'll be the URL, and then we have a then, and pretty much that. So let's do a simple copy paste down here. Let's come here to our code sandbox, and let's create this method called, let's call this here. And inside, what we will do is we will create a constant, say constant get character info equals to this, and let's put this here. Let's pass this. Okay, this is already properly set, so we'll put this here, put this, and then let's put this and copy this. Now, to do a very just to basically show how this works, let's come here, API of this. Let's copy. This is 583. So let's copy this.
Okay.
Let's go to our code sandbox and let's replace this URL here. Yeah, let's replace this. And now let's save. Basically, we have just copied the fetch implementation from here and this one, and then we have brought it here. All we have done is to change the URL that we're calling to be the one that we have in our API of ice and fire so that we can get this kind of response back. And then we have encapsulated it inside this get character info function. Yeah. So that's pretty much all we have done. So we save and then we refresh the browser and then we get undefined. Now if I click this get character info, I'm going to hard refresh. Sorry, let me open this in fresh browser, and I'm going to inspect element, syntax error, expected expression, got this. Code sandbox IO 28.5. Interesting. Okay. 28.5. So where is that coming from?
Was it because on line 28 you put semicolon or the colon?
No, this is line 28. There's no semicolon there. Okay. Let me take this off also. And we have this here. So that's probably where the problem is coming from. Let's refresh this page again and let's come here, let's refresh this. Okay, now we don't see the error anymore. So if we click character, you see that we get the response here, which is the same as we have API file. Now if we come to static sandbox, it's the same thing here. It's the same response that we have, like we have here. So this basically is a simple implementation of, this basically is a very simple implementation of using fetch to interact with an external API. Now what we are doing here already is that we are communicating with an external API, right? So let's save this. Now let's use the whole idea of the different things that we have learned and then put them together. Let's say what we want is that you type the number here, and then when you click this get character, we take that number and make a request, and then of course we put this response in here. So let's say get character, we are going to, when this is clicked, we are going to get the value from here. So what we will have is constant character number equals document dot get element by ID, and here we'll be getting our input box, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
JS character number and then we'll be getting the value of the character number. Remember, we did our previous classes, we looked at element.value.
Yeah.
So this is what we are doing. We're getting the element here, document.get element by ID. This would return the element, and then we're chaining the value so that we get the value and pass it to character number. Yeah. So now, because we want to make sure that we don't make a request when there is no number, like the person didn't enter anything in the box, what we would do is we would say if character number, remember we had earlier looked at handling cases when the basic validation, when the input is not filled. It was one of the homeworks we previously did. Yes. So if character number is equal to, let's make this an empty string, we want to say throw new error, and let this be input box cannot be empty. So let's refresh this, and now let's click this box. Okay, I will take this to, let's bring this here, and let's refresh here, and let's click this character. Now we get the error. Input box cannot be empty, right? So this is a new error that's generated. Good. Now, if there is a number, that means if character number exists, remember when we spoke about string interpolation, right?
Yeah.
So we would be using string interpolation here, and instead of saying 583, we would interpolate the number that is passed. So instead of 583, we will have character number, and then we save. Now, if we come here and we write 583, let's go to the browser and do it instead. If we come here and we write 583, and then we click get character, you see, we make that request. We get the response, which is same as we would actually get here. Now, let's come here and change this to 584, and let's try to get, we get John Stack, right? So now let's take 584 as our value and try it here and see if what we will get is John Stack, because 583 is John Snow. Let's see if 584 will give us John Stack here. So if we take this and put this and we click get character, we see that no, this is still 583. This is making the request to 583, sorry, so I would refresh this. 584. And here we have John Stack. 584. Right. So this is basically how you make the communication with external APIs. This is how you make your communication with APIs. Now, let's say, for example, what we wanted to do was not to print this to the console, but to print this always to the screen, right?
Yeah.
So we would basically go back to our API here, our request, API request that we have here. Remember, we have this div, we say JS Game of Thrones character info.
Yeah.
So let's come here and say what we want to do is that when we get this response that and we make it the JSON form and we get this here, what we want to do here is we want to create basically we want to let's come out, maybe it's easier, let's do it this way. Let's come here and create a function. Let's call this constant Game of Thrones character info, right? And this function takes I will put this above. Let's just put this above here so we can it's reading from top to down and executing that way. So we have this. Now this function should take the name. Let's look at some key properties. There's the name and the gender. Yeah. So let's take name and gender. Right. So let's say we are back here. So this actually takes name and gender. And what it returns would basically be a typical HTML. So we will do this, and then here we would write just like what we learned yesterday. We put a P, and then we say name, and we put a B, and we put this here, so we interpolate the name. We close our B tag, and then we close our P tag, and we would put the breakpoint here just to differentiate the results, and then we put another P, and we say gender, and we come here and we will say B, and then we put dollar. We say we interpolate that variable gender, and we close our B and we close our P. Now this function we have written here, all it's going to return is a HTML string that we can pass as an inner HTML into this div, and it will basically use the name and gender. So now when we come here, remember that this is basically, let's refresh this, 583, let's put it again, 583, let's press get counter. Remember that this is simply a JSON object, so it's just in JavaScript, this is your object, right?
Yeah.
So what we are going to do is that here we are going to say constant name and gender equals to my JSON. My JSON is the response that we get, the response that we show here. Now, I know that this might be a little bit confusing, but this is basically, yeah, I know it's a bit confusing, but this is basically modern JavaScript syntax that we call destructuring, object destructuring. So generally, if we want to get, from the way we have been previously taught, the way I had taught in the previous lectures, if we want to get name from my JSON, we will do something like constant name equals to my JSON dot name, right?
Yes.
And then for gender, we would say constant gender equals to my JSON dot gender. However, in ES6, we have the possibility of, instead of having two lines like this, we can have one line where name and gender are basically the keys in JSON, this object here. So it's called object destructuring. We destructure this object to take only these properties. So it basically, all it is a cleaner way of writing this. So instead of having two of this, you can have one of this. Now, feel free to use this. This is also still valid. This also works. You would still see something like this in a lot of JavaScript code, but in modern JavaScript, you probably mostly would see this style. So I'm just have that in mind. You can use both, any of them. Feel free to use any of them. Now, I will change this function to I would add an HTML in this function. Now we have name and gender. So what I'm going to do is I will say constant GOT character HTML is equal to, now I will call this function GOT character info.html because it returns the string. I will call that function and then pass name and gender as arguments to the function because those are the two that are required here. Now, this is basically going to hold this string, right? So at the bottom here, what I would now do is I will say document dot get element by ID, and now we are looking for this div. This is our info div.
Yeah.
So get, and then I would say dot inner HTML equals GOT character HTML. Now previously what we would have done is that we will first get this element, assign it into a variable, and then set the variable .inner HTML to this. But this is also showing you how you can actually chain this kind of methods. So now we have this. Let's save this. Let's refresh this. Let's put 583. Let's put get character info. Now you see we have name Jon Snow, gender male. So right now I will just at this point remove this breakpoint, and we can save this. We can refresh this, and let's go 584 get character, and then we have John Stark. Let's go 585 get character. We have John Umba. 586 get character. Okay, so there is no character for 586 apparently. Let's see here, 586, if there's someone there, or there's no name. 586 is still John Umba.
John Umba.
Okay, yeah. That explains it. 587 John Wild. Okay. 588 Janelle Kevin. Let's change this to 600. Yeah, Dries Enford. So basically what we have done today is to create a simple Game of Thrones character information page by using the Game of Thrones API. What we have introduced today is the fetch method, which you can actually use to interact with external resources and APIs. And pretty much that has been the only new addition that we have had. Every other thing that you see here, and that apart from probably throw new error, which I think I have probably introduced gently previously, every other thing that we have here, you already have an idea about it because we have gone through this in the previous classes. The new thing that we are introducing here now is the fetch, and this is how you make external requests. And all this does is to get you the data, and when the data comes, all you need to do is the same DOM manipulation that we have learnt of in our previous classes. You just apply that. So that's pretty much it. That's how you interact with external APIs. So this is pretty much the class for today. This is what I wanted to introduce. Next week we will go a bit into more detail, but for homework, I will copy this link and put inside the text also, so that it's available for you to see right here. For the homework, what you should do is that you should communicate with the API, but I don't want characters. So I want pretty much all we have done today. I want you to still do the same thing, but this time I want it to be done with houses.
Okay. There's a double S.
Thank you. Typo. Okay, so there's no information for that house. Let's go with 300. Yeah. So houses, there is a name, there is a region, and there's a coat of arms. I'm not sure if all of them have a coat of arms, but let's see, because I think each house should have a coat of arms. Okay, some houses don't have coat of arms. So basically, what I would want is the name and the region, just like we have done, and that's the homework for today. The same thing we have implemented, you need to do it. You need to change it to use, instead of characters, it should be houses, and instead of name and gender, it should be name and region. Those are the two informations that should be shared. But yeah, if there's any other thing you need clarification on, let me know. Else, this will be it until next week. But pretty much, with this kind of communication, you can build very complex pages. And as we go on, we would actually see that it's possible to build very complex pages. What we will do at the end of this DOM manipulation is that we will communicate with an open API called IMDb, where we will get movie ratings, the name of the movie, the picture of the movie, and all of that kind of information. And then we will display it based on the user search. So yeah, that's what we're going to work on. But for now, yeah, this is a very basic introduction to how the Fetch API works and how you can interact with external APIs and external resources to populate your DOM dynamically.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was been an interesting class today.
All right, thank you. I will try to upload the video on YouTube. I will just stop recording this at the moment. Let's quit this.
Thank you.
JavaScript DOM with Fetch API. Let's save.